Thanks again, Mia, for hopping on to another episode of Untapped Stories. I know we were talking a bit before show, and you've been an AU coach for a while with an awesome background, having played high level at Davidson. But maybe for the parents and athletes who are just listening to this for the first time, getting to know more about you and your background to kind of set the stage, if you could dive into for a second, what were sports, maybe all sports, and in particular soccer, like for you growing up as a young athlete, and how did that kind of shape the coach, mentor, and I know we'll get to it, doctor you wound up becoming?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up outside Seattle. I grew up in Bellingham, Washington. Kind of a unique setting to grow up playing soccer there because there weren't a lot of really competitive travel teams outside of like people who lived in Seattle itself. Because outside of Seattle, the state gets pretty rural pretty fast, which sort of meant that like as a younger kid, I actually got to try on every other sport I wanted to because it wasn't the expectation that you were traveling, every day of every week to just play one sport. So I grew up playing soccer, volleyball, and running track. And then in the winter, everybody skis for us. So that was the other thing we did. But I think very quickly, even when I was running track, I loved the relays, like anything that had a team aspect to it. That was my favorite thing to do. My parents were not the sort of people that were going to put a lot of pressure on me, but they taught me from a very, very young age that like no one's going to make you do anything. Their mantra was sort of like, yeah, we're here for you. We're going to support you. But like, if you want to make the travel team, if you want to have a starting position, the only way that's going to happen is if you show your coaches and your teammates that you deserve to be there. That hands-off approach gave me a really good sense of autonomy at a very young age that whether I wanted it to or not dictated probably like most everything I did in my life. So it certainly impacted me outside of soccer. Like I'm a current fourth year med student and I feel very strongly that soccer played a huge role in like me choosing medicine as a career. It also, I think, is how I lead kind of in general. If I'm working with a group of people, I'm like a lead by example type of personality. Again, that early sense of autonomy is like sort of translated into just like how I carry myself in the world. I've also noticed more recently that it's definitely how I coach too. So we were chatting earlier about like coaching style varies depending on a kid's age, but I think that's one thing that's very consistent is
Yep.
you're only there because the kid wants to be there, right? So like you're going to get as much out of a session as they want to put into it. And I feel like honestly, I can tell a 9-year-old that and they kind of eat it up and run with it. And if I can tell them like, yeah, this is your session, you're in control, I think that's paid off really well. And it's been cool to see even like some of my younger clients really grow into that and see that they have a sense of autonomy and empowerment over like who they want to be as a player.
It's a great way to go about it.
You touched on early on being a multi-sport athlete. I believe you said you played volleyball, track, and then did you ski as well? Is that what you said?
Not competitively. I mean, I
Okay.
like skiing. I'm not on like a ski team.
Okay, gotcha. So we've had a lot of conversations on these podcasts about like being a multi-sport athlete, specializing in one sport. Do you feel like playing volleyball and track helped you with your soccer career and developing as a soccer player?
Yeah, I think it did. Again, my parents, maybe they were having like too wise of conversations with me from a young age, but they always would talk about this again when I was like 10 or 11. They were very encouraging about not trying to pigeonhole myself into one thing super young. Their approach to it was very much like, well, ask yourself what you're going to take away from each sport, right? Because like in theory, you should be getting something different from all these experiences you're doing. And I think that I now can't imagine having not done all those sports, right? Most of my friends to this day came from one of those places. It's something I also talk with some of my clients' parents with about, especially like I said, I primarily have trained younger kids who are all still at the age where they're kind of exploring things, trying on new sports. All of a sudden the kid wants to do swimming and that means their entire schedule changes and we need to pivot. I'm like, great, they should go swim, right? Go do it, go see what you take from that. So yeah, I'm a huge supporter of doing multiple sports if you can pull it off.
What about moving into college for you, Mia? So obviously you played at Davidson, had a great career. I know you said your husband played at Davidson too, so I'm sure you're biased to loving the D1 soccer life, but what should, and we love asking this question for young athletes in particular, what should young athletes know before like making sure that they chase the D1 soccer goal as their dream? Like what's it really like when you get there? And I guess if you're going to work up towards that, what should you know having gone through it for 4 years about the realistic expectations of playing college sports?
So I did not know I was going to be playing college soccer. I actually thought I was going to run track in college for a really long time. And I pivoted my junior year of high school, which is very late, as you guys know, to
Yeah,
be
definitely.
making such a big change in terms of your collegiate athletic career. So I feel like I kind of came into my freshman season feeling like I really had something to prove, to be like, I made the right choice, right? I want to be here. And fell into the classic trap of overcommitting myself. I didn't do nearly as good of a job as I should have balancing everything. And I think that's like the magic word about being a student athlete in college, particularly. I think making sure that you have people you can talk to about that transition is a huge thing. Honestly, I felt very alone when I made that switch from high school to college. Not many of my teammates growing up decided to play in college. Making sure you kind of have like a support system and people that you can like ask questions of, even if that's an older teammate on your same team. I think establishing those relationships early is so huge. And also, I think I can say both things are true. It was one of my favorite experiences I've ever done, and also one of the hardest things I've ever done. You need to make sure that you are committing to wanting to be spending all of your time doing either school or soccer for your season and maybe longer. But then knowing that there's so much you get out of it. So even if there's a week where you feel like you are dragging and you're just like have no extra energy to spend, that will pay off in dividends later, even if it's off the field or court or whatever it is. I again feel like now sometimes when I get really fatigued or tired, I'm like, I can draw back on that, which sounds a little bit cheesy, but I'm like, no, you got through that. You did that. So you can do this too. You'll get through it.
That's a good mentality.
That act of having to balance multiple responsibilities is something that I don't know that a lot of young athletes know until they're in it, whether it's in high school and at the college level. But you touched on some of those life skills that are so important, that touch on, being a student athlete, but also probably helped you in the medical field as well when you're balancing different classes and things. Are there any life skills, beyond sports itself that you try to instill in your young athletes when you're coaching them?
I already touched on autonomy thing earlier. I think that's like probably the biggest one I try to get at. The other is I feel like all of my younger clients have heard me say like, this might sound boring, or I know we've done this before, but we're going to do it again. And just kind of trying to get them used to repetition. Sometimes I'll be planning a session and I'm like, I really want it to be all fun, all new things that are going to get them excited. But I really try to do a balance so that they can see how much they're progressing. And I started bringing like a little notebook where like they can write down, like if we do something that's a timed drill, like let them see if their time changed. And like if it went up, sometimes that makes them really mad and they want to do it again. Or if it goes down, then they can be proud of themselves and like lay eyes on the progress that they have made as a player. And I also think like that, again, a little bit cheesy, but that translates to the real world, right? Like it's not always going to be the fun stuff. It's sometimes the like very monotonous repetition that makes you good at something and then able to take it and move forward with it.
That's really cool. I think I remember that with basketball too, and I used to train a lot more. We'd show up and do form shooting every single time. And by the 10th or 15th lesson, it's like, okay, a kid can make the same shot 2 feet, like, from the basket, but it's not the act of like making those shots. It's just the repetition and muscle memory. And if you can get that across to a kid and have them actually enjoy that, I think that's the trick. Because if they loathe doing it and it's like, I want to do a new drill every time, even the pros, we know from soccer and basketball, like they do the same drills. They perfect them. So I think it's a really key point for athletes is that it doesn't have to be like a flashy drill or something new every single session. It's just like doing the fundamentals over and over until you master them. So that's really cool. And I feel like in today's society, especially, a lot of athletes, especially young athletes with social media, they hang their hats. We've seen it from young athletes on a win or a loss or how much they're progressing or comparing themselves to their peers. What would your message be to young athletes to really separate soccer and like the wins from just like grinding through the process? Because we know as adults it's easy to look at that, but how do you help a young athlete realize what's actually important when it comes to striving for greatness but not having it become their entire life?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a great person for this question because I loved playing at Davidson, but I can say we did not win a lot of games. We were not we were not like the number one team in our conference whatsoever. So there's a lot of grinding through like multiple games in a row. I was just like, what are we doing here? So yeah, I've definitely experienced that. Again, I feel like, a lot of the kids that I worked with are between the ages of like 7 and 12. So often they'll show up and they'll be like, well, I didn't score this weekend. And I'm like, okay, well, what did you play? And then they say defense, but I didn't score this weekend. I'm like, Right. So that makes sense. You weren't necessarily the one that was like up front with the ball the whole time, just asking them, well, like, what did you do? Or outside of not scoring, was there something else that happened that you wish hadn't happened? And again, it's like younger kids, this is maybe a different conversation than what you would have with kids who are like in high school or older, but getting them to learn how to self-identify like even the smaller moments, particularly in a game like soccer, right? Where there's only going to be so many big showing moments, maybe if you're lucky, 2 to 3 goals in a game. But beyond that, it's all of the tiny little things that don't get a lot of reward. I think when you're younger, that's a harder thing to wrap your head around, but it's also something that translates really great to one-on-one coaching because a lot of those very fundamental things are the things that we can work on, right? Like the ball control, that feeling of like my pass just went exactly where I wanted it to, like within a range of inches. Like that sort of thing feels so good when you're a player and when you can start to see your own progress. But again, kind of just relies on building on having some patience and being willing to go through all of the repetition to get those skills down.
That's great. And you brought up some good points about, athletes coming to you and saying, oh, well, I didn't score today. But there's so much more to soccer and sports than scoring goals. And I know, and Gene could probably test this, but I remember being younger in middle school, elementary school, it was all about, well, how many points did you score? Well, there's a lot of other things like playing defense, the intangibles, how many steals did you get? So I guess my question is, what are some intangible qualities that you think are essential to success in sports? And how can younger athletes develop them?
I think it's something I was thinking about too when you asked your question earlier about like the transition from high school to college or just anytime you're moving to the next level, sports will humble you every single time because every time you make that transition, you probably went from being one of the best players on your team to all of a sudden very middle of the pack. Like everybody is there because they were one of the best on their team. It teaches you to pay attention and figure out how to learn from everybody else around you really quickly. It also keeps you from getting too big of an ego because you're always going to be brought back down to earth every time you make that progression. But I think, again, more importantly, it just teaches you that like every person around you has a skill that you're trying to see how they all fit together to move your group forward as a team, particularly in sports where you have larger teams. I think that's like one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable things to learn as you start to grow and get older, right? It's like if I have a group of 20 people, it's a lot of personalities, a lot of different skill sets. So we need to see how we can leverage what everybody brings to make sure we're all getting what we need. Learning how to check in with yourself, check in with your teammates, your coaches, like seek feedback, make sure that you're not just assuming everything's going great when actually one of your star players is really unhappy and like you're not getting nearly as much as you could have out of them if you had only been supporting them, in the way they wanted to be supported. I think those things are the magic intangible qualities that definitely make you a better person, adult, just moving through life.
We actually had Michael Bradley. He played in the NBA for like 10 years and overseas for a while. And he made the same comparison point that when he went from high school averaging like 40 points and 20 rebounds to Kentucky, he was like the 12th man on the roster. Then playing for the Toronto Raptors, he was behind like NBA All-Pro guys. So he's like, if you want to keep climbing the ladder, it's great, but know that you're never going to be the best person and that's hard for young athletes to stomach, I feel like, especially if you want to chase that D1 dream. Like everyone's going to be good. It's about the little things and the mentality that you have that actually make you better as you get there. But no one starts out perfect, whether it's business, life, sports, whatever it is. Like you have to kind of work your way from the bottom to the top and earn it if you really want to get there. And we've seen that play out over and over. Switching to coaching and maybe the parent side for a second. So I love asking this question to some of our better coaches because I think it's a really helpful nugget for like maybe future potential coaches or other AU coaches who hear this. But we see the parents always give you really good reviews and you get a ton of rebookings. So maybe what's one thing you do to connect with the parents when you have a session, whether it's like before the lesson or afterwards? How do you get the parents involved to ensure that coach athlete connection is really successful?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, because most of the kids that I've worked with are on the younger side, the parents are who I'm having a lot of these conversations with. I'm really big on transparency and being very clear about what I can actually offer and what they think is going to happen when we're coaching. I think a great example is like I had a parent come to me and they really, their kid needed to work on like positioning and field awareness. And I was like, that's great. And that's a really important goal. That is not something I can help with in a one-on-one coaching session. But instead of just saying, no, can't help you, we were able to kind of figure out what are some other goals that we could work on in a very targeted one-on-one session. How can we use like cones or videos or things like that to think about field awareness, but then like give the player the skills that she needed to then like focus on that in a team practice, right? Where you actually have the numbers and the space to be working on that bigger goal. I also feel like it's, again, asking the players to be able to start articulating what they want out of the sessions has been so valuable, because half the time you'll get parents and players who come and they want totally different things out of the session, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. But being able to hear them say what they want or what they think they want, and then they kind of look at each other, I'm like, there might be some productive conversations that then happen behind the scenes that are helpful for everybody else.
Get on the same page.
But yeah, I think that's been really great, and also helps me make sure that, like, beyond giving what I think is helpful, again, it kind of goes back to the seeking feedback, is like I want to keep touching base with the parents, right? It's like, if you're paying me to offer a service to your child, I want to make sure that everybody feels happy with what's happening, and that you're getting, whether it be like mentorship, just like having your kid be around an older person who plays sports, whether it be a specific tangible goal, like what do you want and how do we make sure that everybody's getting what they need out of the session.
I love the both sets of feedback too. That's really cool. Because the kid, I mean, they're the ones playing, but the parents probably know the tactical stuff a little bit better if the kids
Right.
are so young. So combining the two, I mean, that's the way to do it. That's really smart.
You touched on earlier how you grew up on the West Coast and then going to Davidson on the East Coast. That in itself was probably a big transition. Going from high school to college, you mentioned about, it's humbling, right? Because a lot of them go from being the best to maybe being one of the worst ones on the team but freshman year until they develop. When you went in for your freshman year, one, how big of an adjustment was it for you? And were there certain things that you did that helped you get through that first year and help you develop throughout your years at Davidson?
Yeah, so many things. I mean, full transparency, I basically walked onto the team at Davidson. And I don't say this to like toot my own horn too much, but I came from a walk-on, did not see the field the first half of our freshman year, to being our captain and playing every game the last 2 years. And my parents will tell you there were a lot of phone calls with tears my freshman fall. Like I thought I made a mistake. I was like, what am I doing? I'm not cut out for this. It was hard because I was far away from family. But I think, like I said earlier, I am such a huge believer in getting vulnerable with somebody who's gone through something similar. So for me, I feel really fortunate that I had some girls who were seniors my freshman year that like were more than happy to talk through it, because at the end of the day, everybody went through that feeling. Everybody experienced that transition. That's how they got better. That's how the people who are older than you are doing the stuff that you're like, how are they doing it? I want to be able to do that, right? They started the same place you did, which is something that I reminded my little sister when she hit college and had the same phone calls. She was like, what's going on? But I think being willing, like I said, to seek feedback, that is so uncomfortable. I remember the first time I walked into my coach's office, I was like, I'm either about to basically get the boot and be off this team, or this is going to be super productive and I'm going to be very grateful I did it. Thankfully, it was the latter, and they gave very explicit feedback on things to work on. But it wasn't even like the stuff that they told me that they were looking for were not things that were even on my radar, right? You get so in your own head when you're not feeling confident that you start to hyperfixate on things that aren't even useful. And I felt like that it was such a small thing. Like it took me walking in for a 5-minute conversation, but it completely changed my approach to that season, changed my approach to my relationships with coaches also, which has, again, I think translated very easily into the way I work with other people now in healthcare. And I think it also just like teaches you to have a little bit of a thicker skin, because sometimes the feedback you get's not going to be great. Like you didn't probably walk in there to just receive a bunch of compliments. You walked in because you wanted to be told what you could do to improve, which is really hard to hear and take some vulnerability. But I think is also one of the fastest ways to see progress.
Talking about leadership, even on your team, and how important that was, that's something that we haven't discussed a lot. It seemed like the upperclassmen probably helped you a lot going through that, which is so important and being a team, because it it's not just about play on the field and in practice, but building relationships with your teammates, which sounds like you did early on.
I think we were lucky, Matt, not to tangent. We had really good seniors. I think the best teams usually wind up having a relationship like that. I've never heard of like the crazy hazing seniors are mean to freshmen actually working out. Like it's maybe funny for the seniors in the moment, whatever, but it's not productive for the team. So it sounds like we were all lucky that we had people like that who helped us kind of guide the way. Maybe I was really pumped to ask this one, honestly, Mia. So for people out there who want to get into private coaching, don't really know where to start, and maybe they're in college, recently graduated, and they're like, oh, I'm busy, I have a job, or I'm doing other things, but like I know I want to stick in sports. I don't want to be a high school coach though, or a college coach. I have a career, or I'm doing X, Y, and Z. What motivated you to, sign up for private coaching through med school? And how's it been just being a private coach while you have a full-time job?
Yeah, I will say, I'm in my 4th year of med school, so I have a little bit more free time than I certainly will later on. But I think I have been fortunate enough to have a lot of classmates that we've played pickup over the last several years, and you always just leave feeling so happy, right? It's just like the easiest endorphin rush. I'm sure you guys still feel the same way if you ever play pickup. It also made me realize it took like an hour out of my day to do something that felt good. And I started thinking about like ways that I could almost like I used to be involved with a volunteer position that doesn't exist anymore. And I'd kind of been like trying to find other ways to fill that need. And this was like a perfect opportunity for me to sort of combine those two things. I'm like, it doesn't have to be a huge time commitment. If you have the capacity to take on a bunch of clients and really make it a job, that's phenomenal. But for me, I feel like I've been very consistently able to work with like 2 to 3 people a week, and just fit it into my schedule without it being incredibly overwhelming. And I also have found that like once you get a couple of sessions in, usually people are more than happy to work with you and be flexible, especially once you kind of like establish what everybody wants to get out of the sessions. So I'm really glad to have started doing it. It's been really fun. I've definitely learned a lot about myself too, right? Working with younger kids. And I feel like, again, there's so many qualities you learn from being part of a team that translate beautifully to real life. And there's already been things that I've kind of talked through, like with my husband. I'm like, wow, being a coach, it makes me think back to our own coaches and like maybe have a little bit more appreciation for some of the things that made us angry at the time. But there's also just, it's different. It's a different skill set and I think package of qualities that you can take away from this, aside from just like being a player and experiencing that side of things. I don't know if I'm articulating that as clearly as I could, but.
No, it did. I had a maybe half serious, half joke question. Did it make you want to tangent into being a pediatrician, or are you sticking out of the youth lane?
I actually had already decided what I was doing before starting coaching, but it has given me a greater appreciation for my friends who are pediatricians. For sure. They're very patient souls.
Perfect answer.
One of the things I wanted to talk about too, because you mentioned being a walk-on, which I'm sure is a really strong challenge in itself. How did that experience of being a walk-on where you really have to push yourself hard just to make the team, was there anything you took from that's helped you being a coach?
I think when you kind of are at the bottom of the team, of the roster, it gives you a little bit of an appreciation that whatever progress you make, everybody else who you're seeing who's really great also had to start lower, just in the sense that it makes you appreciate nobody walked on and was immediately the starting player and did everything perfectly. Even if someone came and seemed like they were a very gifted athlete, there's always going to be some big change that happened between their like first year and their last year playing on that team, right? And I feel like I have had a couple of players already at kind of a young age say that they're, oh, I'm not going to make the travel team, or, oh, I'm not going to be on that team. And I'm like, well, why? You weren't last year. You might not be this year, but that doesn't mean you can't be next year. Which again sounds kind of cheesy, but I think it kind of ties into like, if you teach them to buy into the mindset of like, well, no, I'm going to make or get out of this what I want to have, and put in the effort to at least try and see what I can make happen. Just like the language that I've heard some of my younger clients use to talk about their team has shifted a little bit, which is cool to see. Maybe they just know better than to say things like that in front of me now, because I always give them some like obnoxious, cheesy response to it. But regardless, I would like to think it means that they view their own potential differently than they did, a year ago or 6 months ago.
Yeah, developing that confidence is really important, especially in younger athletes.
And about last question, Mia, I'm trying to think of when I was even training a lot of athletes and you kind of notice different kids at different stages. What do you think is the one thing in youth soccer, but especially as you get older into middle school and high school, in your particular opinion, having seen a lot of kids and played for a while, what's the one thing that separates really good players from really great players? Is it a mindset? Is it a certain skill? Is it a combo? But what would your answer be?
I think it's totally a mindset. I mean, again, one of my best friends, she was like 2 left feet when we were in 7th grade. Like, she loved soccer because it was where all of her friends were. Terrible at it. And she ended up playing D1 all 4 years of college just because she had the mindset of like, I'm going to keep showing up every day. And once she decided that she actually wanted to do something with soccer, it happened. Versus you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't want to do anything with it, it's not going to get you very far.
Where'd she play at, if you don't mind asking?
She was in California. She went to San Diego.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It's a great place to play.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I have one last question, and I know you've probably touched on this in your experience coaching and what you enjoy about it. What's the most rewarding aspect of coaching for you?
I think one of the most rewarding things has been getting messages from parents afterwards. Sometimes kids, I'm like, did you have a good time? I hope you did. But then hearing the parent later be like, they wouldn't stop talking in the car ride home. They were so excited. Like, they had all these, things that they want to practice at home. I had one parent say like, thanks a lot, because now I get dragged out to the yard basically every day to do this one drill. But that makes me so happy to hear, because it means that they, are taking something away from it. And that's the whole point, is that they don't need to be training with somebody one-on-one forever. It's just to build the baseline skills to take those drills or habits and then turn them into whatever they need down the line.
There's nothing better than even seeing those kids come back. And I've seen it play out so many times where they're probably shy, quiet in the beginning, but like your 5th, 8th, 10th session, like in a great way, you can't get them to stop talking. I'm like, we're here to like, for me, practice basketball. I don't need to hear about like what your classmate did today during recess. It's funny, but like,
yeah.
But then at that point, that they trust you and that you're a really good kind of mentor and guide for them. So it sounds like you're getting to that stage with a lot of clients, and I think that's what we love striving for at AU. I mean, we all know the skills are great, but like to have a mentor in your life who's been there, done that for where you want to go, even if you don't reach that stage, I think the person you become along the way and what you learn is so much more valuable. So shout out to you for being an awesome AU coach. We loved having your feedback and kind of sharing your story from early soccer days all the way through college and now. It's been really fun, and I can't wait to get this out there for parents and young athletes.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Mia. Appreciate you hopping on.